completely uninhibited in his criticism of the regulator and Treasury, the FSB. Professor Robert Vivian of Wits University participated in a panel discussion yesterday on the short-term insurance industry and its business practices. Prof, tell me, when it comes to regulation, do you think it's problematic that South Africa's regulation follows global regulatory developments?
Okay, I think the word global regulation is actually misleading because who in the globe are we following? I think if you look at what we are doing, if you look at treat your customer fairly, and you say, well, where does that come from? Oh, it comes from FSA in London. If you say Twin Peaks, where does that come from? Oh, FSA in London. Retail distribution review, which resulted in the idea that we should outlaw commissions. Where does that come from? Oh, London. So I think we're really following the defunct FSA. We're not following global practices. In fact, the National Treasury, when they go to Parliament, this is the argument to the Standing Committee always, we are following best international practices. And every time I have examined what they are putting before Parliament and tried to find support of that in any other market, I have not found any support for that at all. So I think that is as misleading as the arguments which I had with them yesterday, where they claimed that we have to have draconian and intrusive regulation against the short-term market because of the financial crisis. And I think after yesterday's debate, I hope that's been put to death, because as the two speakers before myself and myself pointed out, that the short-term insurance industry weathered that crisis fantastically well and got the admiration of the rest of the world. So there's no link between those two at all. So I think the truth of the matter is we are following the FSA. Now, what you have to realize is that the FSA was a total and utter disaster, and that's why it's been shut down, and it's been replaced by 3 other institutions. So I think what we should do, as I've put in an article which is about to be published shortly, we should at least try to get one original idea for ourselves. The South African insurance market, in my view, and I've written a lot on the history, is the greatest industry in the world. It's led the world on so many things that I wouldn't have time to explain all of that. So we need to have a regulator that comes to the party and tries to make some innovation which is in line with the innovative creativity of the South African market and stop following a failed institution. I think the extent to which the FSA has failed is only now becoming obvious, and I think it's going to become more obvious in the years which come. So I think we should disband any idea that you have in your mind that we're following something called global best practices. That doesn't exist. We're following failed FSA practices, and that should be abandoned a long time ago.
Well, following on from that, how does our regulator then weigh up against the FSA and other insurance regulators worldwide in terms of quality and implementation of regulation?
The quality and implementation is very hard to judge, but I think how it weighs up, it probably leads the world. I mean, if you have a look at their own comments yesterday, what they're saying is whenever we go to the international conferences with regulators, whereas we used to be in the back bench, we're now in the front bench. Now, they're leading in the world in ways which I don't think the rest of the world will ever dream of wanting to follow. Now, and I make that because of the opposition which I've had to some recent proposal to the legislation. The recent proposal is to replace what's called Section 55 of the Short-Term Insurance Act. The old Section 55 empowered the minister to make rules. The new Section 55 enables the regulator to make which rules he wants. In short, the new Section 55 enables the regulator to take over all of the powers of Parliament. And I can't imagine any other Parliament in the world stupid enough to agree to that. I think our Parliament will agree to that because they are known for their stupidity. And that's why I just can't see any other Parliament ever in the world saying we are going to pass a legislation which gives to the power to the regulator to make any laws that he wants. He doesn't have to come and tell us about it. He becomes Parliament. I'm a great fan of history. I've read a great deal of history. We chopped off kings' heads who tried to do that. And now our Parliament wants to sign a bill which says to our regulator, go make any laws you like, that'll be fine. That's a disaster.
In this environment, what should insurers do? Or what's coming their way?
Well, there's one of the greatest historians the world ever knew was Lord Acton. Lord Acton summed up history, and he says, power expands until it is stopped by a more superior power. Our insurance industry can continue to do what it's been doing, roll over and get kicked. Well, Lord Acton will say the more you do that, the more you're going to get kicked. Now, yesterday I suggested that maybe, because I don't really see an alternative at this stage, is that the short-term industry cooperates with the regulator to try and find some middle ground. Hopefully in that cooperation, the middle ground will be found. If not, I don't really see a very pleasant solution for the way forward. As I've indicated, I think the destructive nature of the FSA has not yet been realized. If you have a look at what's happened in the last 2 weeks, if you follow the story, then you'll see why I believe it's destructive. One of the prime benchmarks, one of the sort of flagships of the London market was the setting of the LIBOR rates. 2 weeks ago, that moved to New York. So London financial institution is busy dying. Our industry will follow that unless it finds a way of getting to grips with the regulation. Don't have to believe me. History will prove I'm right.